Hello viewers, I am LAKSHMI PADMANABHAN. Welcome to Gandhi Hacks in South Africa. I ended the last episode with a mention of a disruption which shook the 4 provinces of South Africa out of their routines. It also caused a temporary separation from his family to Mohandas Gandhi. The disruption was the Anglo-Boer War of 1899. Britain's desire to be the sole power in South Africa was the major factor in precipitating the war. There were several other developments as well. Ever since gold was struck in Johannesburg in 1886, the place had been attracting hordes of Britons to it. The Brits knew how to work the mines, how to extract the gold, what to make of it. The Boers were not very good at the game. As a result, there were more Britons in Johannesburg, English-speaking Britons, than the African-speaking Boers. So the population ratio was skewed, and the most important people of Johannesburg, the owners of mines, the supervisors there, the owners of hotels and theatres and all the big amenities were Britons. Naturally, they also began to aspire for bigger things. They began to clamor for political rights. They began to say that the tax that is levied on them, the money that came from the tax, had to be used for the improvement of Johannesburg and not for the improvement of Pretoria. You know the kind of argument that is going on between Bombay and Delhi in India? Same thing. One is the commercial capital, the other is the political capital. So the tussle started between the Boer administration and these prosperous, wealthy Britons in Johannesburg. To this class also were added the Gujarati merchants, the businessmen. They were also flourishing. And the Boers resented all this. They did not like the Britons coming up in this way. They hated the Indians who were becoming very prosperous. The Boer administration in the Orange Free State took harsh measures to keep the Indians out, restricting all employment only to low-level agricultural work. Similarly, the Transvaal Parliament also passed legislation which went against the employment of Indians. Now, the British administration very cleverly added this also as one of the reasons to go to war against the Boers. In this peculiar circumstance, the Indians were in a spot. They did not know how to respond to the war. Should they be neutral or should they take sides? This was the question. Some of them felt that there was no need to support the British because as far as their treatment of the Indians was concerned, it was the same as that of the Boers. Left to himself, Gandhi had a soft corner for the Boers. For one thing, they were very hardworking people, and they were also not as expansionist as the Brits. But Indians at that time in South Africa were British subjects. And in every kind of appeal or every kind of complaint and protest, the Indians would stress this identity of theirs when they were clamoring for the rights, when they were demanding rights. So that should apply also to responsibilities. So this was one argument in favor of going to support Britain in the war. Some felt very strongly that there was no need to support the British, because as I said earlier, they were as racist as the Boers. And also there was this additional risk in case they won the war. That is, if the Boers won the war, then they would take revenge on the Indians. But Gandhi saw in this an opportunity to correct the image that the white people had of the Indians. The Indians were considered self-serving leeches, sucking the blood out of the host land and diverting all the funds, all the money that they earned there to India. They were compared to the woodworms who would drink up the entire sap of the tree. And when the country is in peril, these people will not lift a finger to save it. Gandhi wanted to prove that all these allegations were wrong. And his arguments carried weight, and all the others came round to the idea of supporting Britain in the war. The next question was, in what capacity would the Indians serve in the war? They had no training as soldiers. The only option for them was to volunteer as nurses or caregivers. So the volunteers were given some training in nursing, and Gandhi wrote a letter to the government of Natal saying that the Indians were ready to serve in any capacity in the war effort. They were prepared to do any work, even including scavenging, cleaning, and work of that kind. The Natal government was deeply touched by this gesture on the part of the Indians, but initially they did not accept, they rejected this appeal. The progress of the war was such that the Boers were approaching Durban, and bodies of the dead and wounded were piling up. And so the Indians were allowed to form an ambulance corps. 1,100 Indians volunteered to be members of this corps. Indians belonging to different castes and communities, speaking different languages, following different religions. It was a massive effort on the part of the Indians. They did sterling work in carrying the soldiers from the battlefront, bringing them to the nursing camp, nursing them, and so on. This work was appreciated very much by the British administration. A lot of camaraderie developed between the Indians, the ambulance corps workers, and the soldiers of the British Army. And the newspapers were celebrating this combined effort, this friendship between the two nationalities. "We are sons of the empire after all" was the refrain that rang through the country. War medals were given to Mohandas Gandhi and the other leaders of the ambulance corps. Gandhi recalls a beautiful moment from those stretcher-bearing days. Lieutenant Roberts, an aristocratic youth, was to be brought from the battlefront in a wounded condition to the nursing camp. The British soldiers, the Tommies, were also there, and the ambulance corps workers, that is the Indians. So it was a hot, dry day, and every one of them was thirsting for a drop of water. Now they happened to spot a stream nearby. The Tommies also had seen it. The Indians thought, let the Tommies drink first. The Tommies also felt likewise. They also wanted the Indians to go and drink water first. Now this was a very beautiful moment. It is like, pehle aap and pehle aap, a kind of friendly competition. It was a unique example of the welling up of human goodness in a very dark hour. Another beautiful experience that Gandhiji recalls was the opportunity to serve the Zulu warriors, the Zulu soldiers who took part in the war. Now they were not treated, they were not attended to by the white doctors or the white nurses, and so this was something that was something of a compensation. The united participation in the war effort made the Indian community more organized, and they were also able to establish good relations with the white people. And as a result of these developments, the Indians began to nurse the hope that these friends, newly won friends, would do something in order to bring about a change in the attitude of the administration towards the Indians. The hope was belied soon, but at that point all were hoping that things would change and it was going to be the golden age for the Indians. In the initial days of the war, Britain suffered setbacks. The Boers were fierce fighters, and even after the formal defeat, they continued guerrilla warfare. It was quite tough to defeat the Boers, but the British got tougher, and the methods that they used were really gruesome. They ran concentration camps for the Boer women and children, and also for the black people. We hear of concentration camps during the time of Hitler, the more famous concentration camps. But he was a child when the British unleashed all these atrocities on their enemies earlier. There were huge casualties. The Boers were brought to heel by the Brits through the scorched earth policy of the British Army. And finally, Britain was able to defeat the enemy clinchingly and was able to become the only power in South Africa. British authority was established over the Orange Free State and the Transvaal. Thus, Britain became the supreme power in the whole of South Africa. With this, Indians felt that maybe their future was going to be bright, that Britain was going to consider some of their demands favorably. With this hope, Mohandas Gandhi also thought of taking a step. What that step was, we will see in the next episode. Thank you.